Yeah. So.
It's 5:30 p.m. I will call the regular council meeting of Monday, August 26th, 2024 to order. We'll have roll call. Jarvila,
Present.
Scott,
Here.
Beauregard,
Here.
Kramer, here. Grants, here. You ready for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up, we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? And I will make one note, the meeting minutes were not included in that, so I will put them on the next consent agenda for approval.
I'll make the motion.
Got a motion, is there a second? I'll second. Support, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, moving on to, we have number 7, guests and citizens forum. Is there anyone who'd like to get up and say anything before we get started? If not, we'll move on to reports from staff. City Administrator Lamb. We received one RFP for golf course manager. It was after the deadline. So the personnel committee, Wade and I will meet regarding that application. We also received a proclamation of support from St. Louis County for our letter of support for the RAISE grant program that we issued to them. They were awarded a $25 million grant for the Rice Lake Road, which is Highway 4 corridor project. In addition, we received a thank you painting from the Up North Quilt Guild for their use of the community building, which the city of Woodland supports. This is what it is. So we will find a location and method of hanging that. That's all today. All right, thank you. Recreation Director West.
Golf season slowly winding down, we're getting a couple year-end tournaments and play's been pretty good since it quit raining. Other than that, fall rec programs are starting up, signups are going on, going down. Other than that, that's about it.
Thank you.
I'll say I've been out there a few times, the golf course is in great shape, the greens look great. And
Well, that Mother Nature's been kind this year.
All right, Public Utilities Director Grant.
All right, I'm sure everyone's aware of the color issues we've had in town. That turned out to be a chemistry issue. What we found was chlorine was reacting to the manganese that was in suspension. So it was pulling that out. That's why you can see the videos where people throw chlorine in there and the pool would get dark and other stuff going on. To combat that, we've been on the phone with the chemist, figured out what we need to do going forward. Move the chemical heat point, that should help sequester more of the manganese before the chlorine can attack it. Other thing we're doing is flushing the bad water out. We just went through and flushed all the hydrants in town. We might have to do it a second time, but the problem should start be resolving. So I've already listed different at my house, so hopefully you guys are noticing at your houses. I know not all places in town are experiencing this, so. Other than that, we have switched back to the Aquahawk. That is a cheaper chemical. The Curaflock we were using for main treatment is 87 cents a pound. The Aquahawk we're getting by tote is 70 cents a pound. When we can replace our current chemical storage, this is the tanks, that'll go down to 40 cents a pound, which will be a huge savings for the city. I'm hoping to see that next year. So, and that's all I got so far.
as far as the chemistry issue, was there any health risks at all with the water or?
No health risks with the water, so it's just a cosmetic issue. It's stuff that's already there, it's just the chlorine, is making it visible.
Thank you, I do notice a difference at my house now that the hydrants have been flushed, it is starting to get better already, so. hopefully that continues for everyone. City Attorney Brunel?
Nothing from me, Mayor.
All right, reports from elected officials, Counselor Kramer.
Yeah, first I would like to welcome the Dartmouth to the council. Looking forward to working with you collaboratively and having the questions and probably.
I will have questions.
Also, the free food pantry, it's being heavily used, so please continue making donations to it. With that said, please remember not to donate expired food. Also, there has been some vandalism in terms of people taking food out and they're smashing it out on the sidewalk. So, I would hope that this could discontinue, otherwise we might need to look at, consider alternative options, what to do with that. And then lastly, the East Range Police Department does have a, full-time officer position open, and it will be open until that gets filled, so I need community members know somebody that they can pass you on to that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Morgan?
I guess I'd like to echo Kramer there too, and welcome Dave. We're all available to help answer questions. I know it's a lot to just jump into and get the big packet. It's a lot to read. So yeah, anyway, we can help you transition in. Well, I'm sure you'll do great and nothing else for me.
All right, thank you. Counselor Scott?
Yeah, the only thing is that the garden club had their summer picnic barbecue on August 21st. There was a lot of people there. Lots of food that was eaten, so they enjoyed it and it was nice to see. That's all I can.
Thank you. Counselor Darla, anything?
Well, thank you for the welcome. Not been signing commissions or anything, so I have nothing.
All right. Thank you. I also was gonna welcome Dave to the table up here. If you have any questions, yeah, certainly reach out. I'm looking forward to working with you till the end of the year, and we'll see what comes after that. Also, we've been talking with the UPAC committee about their contract again for the concession stand. That will be discussed with them and brought up at upcoming meeting. But they will be operating at the concession stand again, the arena. Other than that, that's all I have. Then on old business, there is none, so we'll move on to 11.1, which is a public comment section. Proposed tax abatement pledge for Fort Lakes Community Wellness and Recreation Center, which we know as the arena. So we're gonna move to recess the regular council meeting while we have the public hearing section, and then we'll be open the regular meeting. So is there a motion to recess the regular meeting?
I'll leave that one.
Is there a second? I'll second that. All those in favor?
Hi.
So I'd like to call the public hearing for the proposed tax abatement pledge for the Community Wellness Center, the financing to order. First, we'll have staff comments. So are there any comments from staff that are here?
Evening, Mayor, members of the council, Shannon Sweeney with David Brown Associates. Some months ago, you've initiated a project to do renovations, significant renovations at the arena facility. And once we'd received construction bids and had a number of different grant opportunities in place, we set about the process for putting the local financing into place. And so we engaged the services of a placement agent to assist in soliciting proposals for the purchase of bonds to finance $2,491,000 of project costs at the arena. That placement agent secured proposals, and the lowest overall cost of borrowing was proposed by Security Bank and Trust out of Glencoe, Minnesota. We've worked with that bank several times, and they are an active purchaser of municipal bonds. And at the end of the day, they had a proposal that we thought was very representative of market conditions, a good competitive proposal. That was a lower interest rate than other proposals received at 4.63%. The bonds are structured over a 20-year term. That's the maximum duration that we can go under tax abatement authority. As cities are created by statute, statute dictates how cities can borrow money and what process they need to go through in order to do that. And for facilities like this, a common statute that's used for the issuance of general obligation bonds is tax abatement authority. Has a fair amount of flexibility with regard to the types of projects that can be financed under that authority. And the cities used that authority in the past, for example, for our street utility reconstruction project, I think it was in 2020. And so covered the street portion of the project costs at that time, as we weren't using special assessments. So tax abatement authority is an alternative to the use of special assessments. The process for authorizing the levy for the repayment of the bonds requires a public hearing, which is what we've noticed and called tonight to take public comment with regard to that tax levy pledge that will be used to make payments on the bonds. Again, that levy pledge is for a term of 20 years, the same as the term of the bond issue. It's process authorized under statute in order to make a pledge for the repayment of bonds, which we're intending to do. The two action items that will be before the council following the public hearing will be a resolution authorizing the tax abatement and then a resolution awarding sale for the bonds if you choose to proceed with financing the project costs as proposed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to the documents that were provided. Freiberger Law Firm prepared the award resolution for the bond issue, and they've reviewed our tax abatement documents related to the levy pledge. So happy to answer questions on that.
Any questions from the council?
Did this number assume any additional grants for the banker levy or not?
I think it assumed one $250,000 grant. We will pursue a total of 500,000. But we were concerned in our estimate, because at that time we weren't sure that we could structure construction like the Eckerd Water did. And the bond can be paid off early if we were to secure other grants and funding.
February 1st of 2032 is the first opportunity to prepay. It's common to have, they call it call protection or the inability to prepay for about 7 to 8 years. It's pretty much a market standard. Otherwise, we pay a little bit higher interest rate. What I can tell you is that in current market conditions, you can reinvest those bond proceeds at an interest rate that's ultimately higher than what you're paying in interest on the bonds. And so it shouldn't cost you, at least in current conditions, any money to, if you have surplus funds that you hold on to until you reach that call to make a prepayment. Happy to answer any more questions on that topic as well.
Aren't any other questions from the council? And the next item on the agenda would be, there's two different public comment sections. One would be public comments against the project and the other is public comments for the project. So if there's any public comments against the project, we can hear those now.
I was curious, did Wade have anything to say about the project or?
No.
No.
There's no public comments against, we can take the public comments in favor of the project. There are none votes other than, there's opportunity for any other agencies. I don't believe there's any other agencies present who have any comments on the topic. So hearing no other comments, there'll be a motion to adjourn the public hearing, and then we will call back to order the regular council meeting to take motions on the abatement documents. Is that the right order? All right, so is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing? Also, there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, I will now call the recessed regular council meeting back to order. And on that agenda, the next item would be 12.1, the resolution approving the property tax abatement and the tax levy pledge for the 2024 general obligation bond. Are there any questions on the resolution itself that we were provided? We have had discussion, talked about it before, and it's been forever to put it together. If there aren't any questions, I would need a motion to approve that resolution. I'll make that motion to approve the resolution. Is there a second for the tax abatement?
I'll say I think this does open up the arena to be marketed a lot more when it's restored here. An ice plant is reliable. We can look at getting out of town teams here to play tournaments and different things like that. I think it'll be good for the city to keep the arena functional. So I'll support.
There has been a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We will move on to 12.2, which is the resolution awarding sale of the general obligation tax abatement bonds. So these go hand in hand. So is there a motion to approve resolution 12.2?
We'll make that motion.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, moving on 12.3, we have signing a charter of New Age Pumpernickel for a update for us.
That's the quickest public hearing I've ever been. So we thought we'd take some time just to give a bit of an update on what we've been up to and what we're planning over the next year or so. Apologies to those who were at WaterCon when I did give an update over there. I'm assuming there are a couple of people here who might not have been there to hear me blabber on. Oh, too interested in seeing them as Point Lakes. So over the last year and a half, we have been working on sort of formalizing our merger. February last year, what was PolyMet merged with Tech Resources. A couple months later, Glencore bought out the remainder of PolyMet, and NewRange became a 50-50 joint venture between Tech and Glencore. So these are two giants in the mining industry, very different look to what PolyMet looked like being a junior. So one of the things we had to do was obviously, get that merger sorted out. You've got two pretty big kids on the playground. You got to make sure that everyone's playing nicely together. So did some work on that. A couple months later, we did lose our 404. It was revoked. That was quite a blow to us. The kind of unprecedented move by the state. So, we took a long, hard look at what the project was proposed, what we can do better, so that when we take our next step forward, we step forward the best, in the best possible way. So we're going to make sure that this project is pretty solid. That's not to say that we didn't have a solid project before. It was the highest rated EIA ever at the time of approval. But we think we can do better, and the world has come a long way since we initially submitted our permit applications. We've also been pretty busy out there over the last year and a half. We removed lots of numbers, but we're pretty excited about the amounts of work that's happened out there in the concentrator. 24,000 tons of steel went out of there. 19,000 tons of that have already been recycled. 65,000 tons of concrete that we're going to recycle as well. 57,000 man hours, union man hours out there. So, lots of stuff happening in the concentrator, our Edmund building, the old LTV building,
has been torn apart, abated, and we now have a pretty cool work environment out there. February last year, PolyMed had 27 employees, we're sitting at 62 at the moment. And really what, that whole story is around, our parent companies are not back as it's to generate a better project and work on the sustainability side as well. Work concerns raised during our permitting process. We need to make sure that we're really listening to any comments or concerns. So we're going to be doing 4 major studies over the next year. The first one, we're going to look at our tailings dam. The current plan is to use the existing LTV tailings dam with the existing tailings dam construction, so upstream construction. Some concerns were raised around that during permitting, and while we do feel pretty confident in the design that we put forward, there's been some tailings related issues in the world over the last few years, and we really want to make sure that the next steps on that tailings dam meet best possible standards. So we're going to look at, is a center line possible? For those of you not in the mining industry, I'll probably speak to you afterwards because that could probably get a little bit boring, but we're going to look at center line, which is typically a little bit more stable. We're going to look at potential infill in existing pits out there, depositing tailings in existing pits. There's a bunch of big holes out there, and we can talk about it. Obviously, there's cost related implications, there's permitting related implications. So we're going to look at all of this. The next study that we're going to do is around our water treatment. We committed to meeting the WildRISE standards. We'll be the first industrial site in the region to actually meet those standards, and we stand by those commitments and committed to construct a $100 million water treatment facility to do just that. Maybe we can do better. In the last 6 years, technology has advanced. We have access to some pretty amazing resources between technical resources. So we're going to look at that and see if maybe we can come up with even better. Maybe not necessarily to get significantly better than that WildRISE standard because it is really hard to meet, but maybe we can do it more efficiently. The third area we're going to be looking at is throughput. So our operation was permitted at 32,000 tons per day. When that application went in, that was a pretty good throughput based on the technology that was available at the time. Things have progressed again. When you've been permitting for 19, 20, 21 years, things do tend to improve. So we're going to look at 40,000 tons per day. That just sort of aligns with the current technology, allows us to optimize production, optimize around sustainability and emissions. So we're going to look at what that could look like. And the last study is around ore transport on site. Those of you know the site, our pits are about 6 miles away from the old concentrator plant, which we plan to use again. And we have rail reticulation on site, and we're going to use rail cars to transport the ore. Our parent companies have clean climate or sustainability goals around carbon emissions. Diesel locomotives are not necessarily the best option in terms of emissions. So we're going to look at what installing a conveyor system on site will look like. So the impact there is obviously additional footprint we'd have to construct these conveyors, and conveyors are incredibly expensive. So we'll be looking at that. So that's a bunch that I've just provided you in terms of where we've been over the last year and then what we're going to be doing over the next year. Do you guys have any questions for us?
I'm wondering if we have like a full projected time frame to start.
So is that the hardest? We know we're going to get this question, and it's such a hard one to answer. I mean, if we could, we would break ground immediately, and our parent companies are ready to do that. Permitting in the state is incredibly challenging. We're looking at a year of study, and then update to our permits, and the 404 permit can take some time. We're hoping to be able to break ground in the next 3 to 4 years. Hoping, but again, this is a hope.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who you will see.
So you have a fun.
It's pretty hard for our parent companies to keep putting the bill for another
Yeah.
20 years. They have deep pockets, but that's pretty deep. I don't know if you guys have seen the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce study in permitting in Minnesota. If you haven't, it's pretty eye-opening, not just how challenging, how slow, and how costly permitting is in Minnesota compared us to surrounding states. This is a tough state. All right, that was a long answer to a very simple question. We would love to open up as soon as possible. We know the community's been waiting.
I don't wanna see jobs leave the area, but have you guys discussed moving the facility potentially to like North Dakota where there's less stringent regulation?
You know, a huge piece of the value for the North Met project is the existing infrastructure on site. It really does make that North Met project, which is a short-term project. I mean, it's not a 100-year project, which Massawa could potentially be. You know, it's a short-term project. To construct that amount of infrastructure out of the state would be pretty costly. So we have to really consider that. I know Tamarack, that's their, the Talon Metals, that is their solution. We would hate to move our jobs out of Minnesota. We really would. Yeah, some pretty amazing facilities out there.
We also have a workforce here that has a long history in mining and
Yeah.
we can definitely deliver the workforce for that.
Now, our whole kind of slogan at the moment is right place, right, you know. Well, this is the right place for a land like this, and you know, country really needs minerals, and the Iron Range really needs, you know, projects like these done right, obviously.
It's nice to see that you're committed to the area, and not really looking to leave. We've had a lot of facilities decide to leave Minnesota because of the permitting.
Yeah, yes, no, that's not, you know, I mean, I can't imagine we would ever turn around and say, oh, we're gonna mine material here, sorry, but you'll, you know, processing jobs will take it elsewhere. That's just not our project. You know, the North Met project is 360 jobs during construction. It's not massive, but it's significant for a region like this. At some stage, we'll do an updated economic study to be able to give you numbers on what that will look like. But as the project's, you know, economics change, we kind of got to tweak things to see what that will look like. I would also really encourage anyone, if you would like to come up to site, step below there to see what we've been up to. That those of you who've been into that old concentrator, I was out there today and it blows your mind what you've done out there. It's truly amazing how that building has been emptied out and ready for what's next.
You folks have obviously put in a lot of time, effort, and money into the project. Is there anything that people in the public or any like municipal governments in the area can do to support you folks or your efforts?
You know, I think we feel very supported by these communities. That's the thing in question for us. I mean, it really is. The question goes the other way. I think for us, I think it's hard for us to see people's hopes and expectations to get dashed over and over again. We understand that, you know, it takes a lot of patience to support a project like this. So please just keep believing in the project. You know, we're in a pretty good position right now. If you look at who is supporting us, the demand is there. I think I sent you guys some information. 33% of the country's copper is up there. There's no way this project is not going to get delivered. There is no way. It's just when and how. What do you think?
So there's no representatives that we should be reaching out to try to push environmental groups farther or anything?
You know, I think the next year we might go a little bit quieter again. I intend to do a better job of keeping you guys up to date on what's been happening as we progress the studies. I definitely welcome comments from you guys and from the community on what, you know, where we are and what we're doing. But I think at this stage, you know, I don't think so. Just keep supporting us in the ways you do. support. Yeah, and please come out, tell the story of your end. But again, I do have some business cards here, anyone wants to come out, I'd love to show you around.
I also have his contact info, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have the little one pager, if anything in there is vague or we want any other information, please reach out to me. I'm happy to come and chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you trying to keep us, I mean, public all updated. Like to see it come to reality one of these days, so we'll hang in there, keep waiting. All right, 12.4, Jacob Crisco with Bolton and Mann with a draft of our water system analysis.
Good evening, everyone. So what I'd like to do is kind of give a brief recap of where everything's been at the last several weeks, because there has been a few pieces that have developed. So the first thing is the first draft of the water study was provided on the 16th. And then on the 20th, we had the technical meeting. So that was representatives from the city met with staff in Bolton and Mann. We reviewed in detail the water study. That meeting took an hour and a half plus, so I'll keep it short tonight, so we all can enjoy our evening a little bit more. But ultimately, out of that technical meeting, we did have a couple revisions and a couple updates that we did have to the study, so that was pushed out. So you guys have in front of you version 2 of the draft at this current point in time. Also in your packet is included is the presentation, and I would say more of a summary presentation that was provided to the technical committee. So I'm not planning on going through that entire presentation tonight, but I wanted to provide you guys a few of the slides just to have the details on what we highlighted in the technical meeting. So that way afterwards, if you want to go back, you can kind of see maybe where we spent some time in the meeting. But ultimately, if you're okay with it, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through a little bit of the presentation findings, and then we can have some discussion on the draft report afterwards. So in your packet, again, you have that water system analysis PowerPoint presentation. So overall, what I want to kind of summarize again is that the study goals was to provide a high-level review of the facility's existing conditions, and then also look at tangible options or alternatives for the city's consideration. So the general report format, as you guys go through it, is ultimately it provides an introduction. It gives you design conditions, which ultimately look at like the city of White Lakes population, usages, and other sort of factors to understand how much water the city uses and what really goes through the pipes. After we look at your existing conditions, and what that gets into is fundamentally your facility, your infrastructure's health and condition. There's a water quality review that looks at where you're appropriating from, being Colby Lake. It looks at the water quality standards in the state of Minnesota and cross-references that to what has been coming out of the facility, along with any proposed water treatment system improvements or alternatives, which is what we'll talk about tonight. The draft study and the report includes an opinion of cost. That's for all alternatives. It gives you estimated costs for the projects. And lastly, we provide some recommendations and discussion on funding. So those funding opportunities you guys can look into. And like I said, as the next several pages, as we kind of move into it, provide a lot of information for you guys to kind of look and highlight. It gives you the numerics of White Lakes, and you don't necessarily need to get into that. But in design conditions, that's typically population based. So the one thing we wanted to highlight is that we looked at your historics. And ultimately White Lakes was trending negative based off most of the metrics that are out there for today, whether that's census data and other things, other information that's available. To that effect, the study assumes no change in the population as we want to maintain the opportunity to serve the population that you have currently. So a negative trend did not make sense. So that just simply we maintained it as it was. We use your pumping records, and any sort of information you had from the commercial, residential water loss breakdown. Ultimately, there's not a lot of metering in White Lakes other than commercial districts, so that's where we put most of the information. The next slides in your packet provide you the numbers, the breakdown of what you use, which fundamentally from a 5-year average, White Lakes uses about 156 gallons per capita per day. So for every individual on a daily basis across an average uses 156 gallons. There's more breakdown that we provide you. We looked at some projections, and from a projection standpoint, we forecasted out to 2035 and 2045, looking at those years to determine what you would be needing in the future at that point. So in summarizing all that information, even though that was a quick glance, what we found in the existing conditions is that your water supply infrastructure has some basically age restrictions that are, as it's well aged, has reduced some of the treatment capacity, and specifically the source water in Colby Lake, with some of the intake set up, there are some issues that have restricted ultimate capacity through the plant. Furthermore, we saw that with the source water being from Colby Lake, there is some aesthetic issues, and that's something that Jake talked about today, but also that you guys have seen from across the board is that Colby Lake typically has aesthetic issues that just cannot be taken out from additional treatment fundamentally. Looking at water storage, your water storage is adequate. Your water distribution system, most of it is predominantly original being cast iron. And the city is undergoing repairs as needed, or basically replacement of infrastructure as it can, as it needs. The water treatment plant we found is original for the most part. It provides a high treatment cost of source water. Its chemical storage and other sort of a setup in facility in some ways is inadequate and does need to be updated. And if there is a construction project in the future, that will be required to be updated. But the bottom line is that the facility will meet the 2035 and 2045 demand projections. And the bottom line is, while your facility is aged, the current state will meet those future projections if there's no more deterioration. The next several slides go over the alternatives, and I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly. But the 6 alternatives that were provided, and some of this was from city council meetings, talking with public utility staff, and then also our own experience. We looked at restoration of the existing water treatment plant and still utilize Colby Lake. We looked at regionalization with the East Range Water Board, establishing an interconnection, construction of a new water treatment plant using the same source of Colby Lake, restoration of the existing water treatment plant, moving the source to Whitewater Lake, construction of a new water treatment plant using Whitewater Lake, and then construction of a new water treatment plant and then sourcing it from ground. So those were the 6 alternatives that we have. Overall, we do have a bunch of cost breakdown in the next several sets of slides, with restoration of the existing water treatment plant using the same take being roughly 13 to 17 million. Advantages and disadvantages of using that is it's the lowest immediate capital cost. You're not reliable on the East Range Water Board. The city is familiar with the treatment technologies. Some of the disadvantages are going to be that you're not going to, from the public perspective, deal with that aesthetic issue. And the facility is still aged, so at 10 to 15 years out, you're going to have additional issues develop as the facility ages, even with a restoration. Alternative 2 is regionalization of East Range Water Board. This looks at an interconnect between the city of Aurora's distribution system and White Lake's water tower. It does require a little bit of infrastructure, approximately 1,500 feet of water main and a booster station. That capital cost is estimated to be 20 to 27 million. Advantages and disadvantages are simply going to be, you do address that public health concern. Water quality, testing and evaluation of the Embarrass pit where it's being pulled from shows it's a higher quality water. Does not have a lot of the same issues that Colby Lake does. And even though they are in the same watershed, actually Embarrass pit pulls from a different area that's typically is a little bit cleaner, and there's some geology there that helps out. Disadvantages would be that you are reliable in the East Range Water Board, and it is a mid-level capital cost. So alternative 3 is construction of the new water treatment plant and utilize the same source. This project is estimated to be 23 million to 31 million. Fundamentally, you're bringing the water treatment plant up, you're demolishing the water treatment plant and building a new facility. So you're not going to have any long-term, I'd say any 20 to 30 year maintenance costs on the water treatment facility, but you're still using the same source, which provides the public opinion of water aesthetics. And you could have additional costs in that intake in the future. Alternative 4 is restoration of the existing water treatment plant, new water supply source. That capital cost is estimated to be 14 to 19 million, since that's just a restoration. Disadvantages and advantages being that from an advantage standpoint, it does address the public concern since you're not using Colby Lake, but fundamentally it's a moderate capital cost that can lead to additional work in the future 10 to 15 years as facility deteriorates further. You will have to do additional permitting when moving to Whitewater Lake. And additional raw water infrastructure will be required. Alternative 5 is construction of the new water treatment plant and use a new raw water supply source. So everything's brand new. That cost is 24 million to 33 million. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantages being you address that public concern perspective of water quality, little maintenance in 20 to 30 years. But it's a very high capital cost. That's the highest capital cost of all the options. Lastly, we have alternative 6, which is construction of a new water treatment plant and a groundwater pumping station. So this is going to be a technology change from what White Lakes currently does and does not include relying on the third party. That capital cost is roughly 19 to 27 million. That would entail building a new water treatment facility that uses filtration as a focus, and then sourcing groundwater through pump stations. So there would have to be a hydrogeologic study completed in the area to determine what sort of rates can be acquired to furnish White Lakes. Advantages and disadvantages, it's a lower initial capital cost than compared to all the options. There will be low maintenance costs in the next 20 to 30 years as all the infrastructure is brand new. Some of the disadvantages are you will have to permit that new source, water corporations permit specifically, and there is a little bit of uncertainty in whenever you get into groundwater sourcing. And that specifically comes from the fact that while we can estimate as much as we want about the geology, once you start to develop the well and use it, then you're going to really have a good understanding of what actually is going to come out of it. So there's a little bit of risk involved with groundwater, but ultimately it comes at a lower infrastructure cost. So the report provides you an opinion of costs side by side, so you can kind of take a look through all those capital costs between alternative 1 to alternative 6 as we decide comparison. The last thing we did look at is your O&M costs, and that does play a role as you read through the study in like what long-term White Lakes can be expected. We can get some grants and there is some initial capital, but ultimately whatever you carry on long-term from years to years, that also can wait. That should wait as a decision. Specifically, as White Lakes has a very high water enterprise cost just due to treating Colby Lake. Fundamentally, ultimately, it ranges between 70 to 80% of your O&M budget goes just to treating and producing water. So we broke that down to a cost per 1,000 gallons. And what we found is that your water production cost is roughly $3.94 per 1,000 gallons of water. Your O&M ranges from $450,000 to $530,000 a year. Comparatively, the city of Aurora, we provide here just as some context. They look at an O&M cost of roughly $220,000 a year with a water production cost of $2.73. So there's a lot of savings potential in changing sources. And we wanted to kind of highlight that, but also kind of give you guys a snapshot of really what you're spending on chemical.
But in here,
Yep.
just to clarify for everyone, we have a chemical budget of $126,000 every year. Aurora's is $9,000. So if you're looking at costs, that is what it costs to treat that water.
Absolutely. So that is definitely a big factor as an O&M cost and can definitely be reduced. The report provides you some context on funding. So the primary funding source recommended is the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. And that provides market rate loans from 2 to 3%, provides some additional details in the report for you guys to review. Earlier this year, we did put an application in, even though we didn't have a project selected. In a previous council meeting, we had talked about that just to get you on the docket. So in the future, it's easier to acquire funding through PFA. One thing to note on PFA is it utilizes an EDU calculation. So what this means is that they look at your average household median income, and it's based on 1.2% of that. So there's going to be an affordability threshold that's discussed in the report a little bit more that ultimately White Lakes will have to meet prior to receiving full grant after a certain point. In talking with internally here, we're estimating that being rated around 8 to 10 million being the affordability limit prior. And there's a few scenarios the report kind of details out on that, and we definitely are open to having some additional discussion if there's any questions. But depending on whether you have a high O&M cost or a lower O&M cost, that number can change.
Got a question.
Sure.
You offer the cost of Aurora, which I understand, Becky said it's quite a bit less.
Mhm.
Did you do any studies on what it would cost for water treatment for taking water from Water Lake?
That was not included in the study. We looked at the water quality, but we have not run any analytics on it. So.
What are the actual sources of the water?
The sources?
Whitewater gets a lot of its flow from Colby Lake.
I knew that.
So that PFAS detected in there, I'm worried about that being a future standard. The other thing is that 126 to 130 million gallons we pull here from Colby Lake, now be sitting in Colby Lake, which in turn would be transferred into Whitewater. So my concern is Whitewater might be good for a few years, but once that water keeps cycling through into Whitewater Lake, I foresee that lake getting darker and starting to run into color issues, just like we're already facing right here with Colby.
Because some have said that without the mine using the diversion works, the water in Whitewater is cleared up some. But I'm concerned about the transfer of water between the two, just as you're saying that, okay, it's a potential, because it's not really, from what I understood, a spring area, because of dams.
There are 2 springs that feed that lake that I know.
Yeah, there are some springs. The question is, where are we gonna put the intake on Whitewater? If you go towards that area, you're gonna be running into complaint of that through our wastewater dumps in, and people have obvious concerns there. And then if you pull up closer, like by the diversion works, now you're closer to that inflow from Colby Lake, because that water's gotta go somewhere, and it's not gonna just sit in Colby. So. Something to think about anyway.
Oh, I know.
So as we kind of talk through all these alternatives, I'm gonna step into the technical committee review, which also I think Dave is gonna answer a little bit, maybe if kind of step into your question as well. So the focus of the technical meeting was to review the alternatives and evaluate, is there additional options or which alternatives would the city like to look into further? Because from taking a step back, the water study provides a high level review of all the alternatives that were discussed and that we presented. But it did not necessarily go into a lot of detail on determining, say, appropriation rates or, look at hydrology, but those are definitely options. And so we're at the stage we're in right now is we need to hone in on maybe some of those alternatives that would be the next step to investigate a little bit further. So again, on August 20th, we met, we reviewed the existing conditions, a lot of the information in detail that we talked about tonight that we just kind of moved through quickly. We talked through the alternatives in the study, presented opinions of costs and funding sources. And from that committee, there was 2 alternatives that were discussed as an interest to proceed with. The first was to investigate alternative number 2, which is regionalization. The basis being it, and the next to do work items would be is to prepare a list of questions or concerns to better understand what the relation to the East Range Water Board would be. And specifically understanding like infrastructure ownership along with East Range representation. The second alternative that was of interest from the technical committee meeting was the groundwater supply. So to proceed with the alternative number 6, we're looking into it. The best method forward would be to develop a hydrologic study of the area and better understand what sourcing groundwater would look like, specifically water quality along with potential appropriation rates. So those were the 2 alternatives that were presented and discussed heavily throughout that meeting. So at this point, I don't know if you guys have any additional questions, but where we're at with the study is we can finalize that study. I'd recommend and ask that if you guys have any comments on the draft reports, we're more than happy to answer them. And you should take some time to review the study and then at any point in time, feel free to reach out to us, or provide those comments and we can provide some additional answers on that. In the same way, to move the study forward, it would be good to determine which alternates you guys would like to proceed with, so.
And it would be up to the council if you want to make a motion to go forward with the recommended alternatives, or if you wanted to review the study some more and make a determination at the next meeting.
Just as a starting off statement, the meeting we talked about on the 20th was myself, with Mayor Grams, Jake and Becky, along with Jake Briscoe from Bolton. We discussed in detail the current status and what we believe we should move forward with. There's a lot of questions with the interconnects to Aurora. I feel, just my personal opinion, that it's until we know more of that, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in that basket. We need to see how that board's gonna be reassembled. What our representation looks like, what our cost looks like. Before we say that that's 100% what we're doing. So I would. Like the recommendation says, I felt that we should pursue two options. So groundwater is typically a little more stable, less organics to treat. And we really don't know what kind of water we're dealing with until we put a well in the ground. We could have relatively close to the same water, or we could have water like Dual, Minnesota, and it's perfectly fine right out of the ground.
But then, excuse me, if you look at City of Kenny, which is this close to Bugle, they've got some of the worst water on the range too. So you've got two cities drawing from similar aquifers. One is fantastic and the other is.
Yeah.
Low quality water.
So then those are, we don't know.
Are they talking about multiple test wells? What kind of size, what kind of depths?
Sure. So the initial step would be to do a desktop exercise to evaluate. We're kind of lucky because up in this area with all the different mining activity along with other sort of investigations that were done, there is a lot of information available. So that would be pulling that information together, and then eventually, as you're indicating, you'd be running some analytics on it, doing some pump tests to see if we can appropriate at certain rates to feed the city, and then looking at water quality. Again, always kind of having some conversation about groundwater is sometimes when you get into a scenario where you start using the well, over time it can change. When you develop that well initially, you could have a high flow rate, lower flow rates. And sometimes the chemistry as it pulls from farther areas in the aquifer, that's going to change a little over time. So that first piece is going to be a snapshot of what we currently have. But ultimately, that could change in the future, but you do your best to just kind of do that initial analysis, which is again, water quality testing and then just doing pump tests, so.
And you run into the same changes of surface water where you have maybe species that come in or.
Correct. And because the thing is, as you get into surface water, if you start appropriating it, depending on rates, you can draw down water bodies as well. And sometimes you get into different zones within the lake, you can see slight changes. So that is a risk of surface water as well.
Are there any other questions for Jacob? I know you said we did meet for an hour and a half or so. I think the consensus was that, a new water source would be one of the best, options. And we did, like Stuart said, chose to look at two of them instead of just throwing all our eggs in one basket. So there are some questions to be answered and some action items that are listed there. So if people want more time to look at the report that was sent out to us, the full report, we don't have to make a determination now, but if we're good with looking at a new water source, we can have them go ahead with the action items to start a meeting with the water board and getting a cost estimate to do the hydrogeological study.
Would that interconnect with the Laura, is there a certain deadline that we have to meet, maybe 15 months or?
So you're gonna want to make a firm decision in the next 4 months because the county needs information as to what size pipe to put in the ground when they tear up the road. And so if we're joining, we want to put in much larger pipe than they were sizing.
Yeah, and just kind of qualify that too, is we're talking about maybe upsizing a couple inches on diameter, which is tens of thousands of dollars versus if it was a re-open up, you're talking potentially millions. So there's a little bit of risk there. The regionalization ultimately is your shortest timetable for determination. And again, it's really restrictive to that county project that's full.
And I would say, making a decision at the next meeting would not be a concern, but if we put it out any further than that, we'd run out of this time.
Because what we'll do is, since Bolton and Mink is working on that county project anyway, there's been some discussions and understanding and ultimately, that 4 to 5 month timetable is going to provide that it's just a minor modification to plan set to say go up a couple sizes. So not too much work there if it is decided that you want to just upsize the pipe for risk mitigation, but like I said, well, it's still for
They're bidding projects, so.
right.
And it's not really an estimate, the water production costs is Aurora's current treatment, not what it's going to be in the new
Correct.
source. And it doesn't include the extra maintenance on a booster station and 15,000 feet of
Correct.
water.
I was at the last meeting and spoke to Luke about what he does with other communities. It sounds like they own all the way up to where the booster station would be. And we'd operate our stuff in town.
So the board would own up to the booster station.
Yes. So we wouldn't be driving in between Aurora and Point Lakes doing monitoring breaks and something like that happening.
But would our booster station be at the water tower at Laskin, or would it be in Aurora by the pump?
Most likely it would be in Alaska. Right where it enters, because that's where we start servicing out there at the energy park. So we'd have to boost chlorine for the distance it's traveling.
With the pumps from Aurora can get the water to Laskin.
Yeah, correct. So kind of how it will work out is as the system's pressurized, pushes it to the booster station takes over and pushes it to your water tower. Then your water tower is gonna feed through this irrigation system.
How long does it take to complete the hydrogeological study to determine whether or not wells are feasible?
Sure, very good question. Typically that can be probably 2 to 3 months, so.
Does that include drilling test wells?
That would just be the desktop review. So in the term of test wells, you can do some smaller wells just to look at, flow capacities, but ultimately you're gonna wanna get into installation of a larger well that you can test that would be quote unquote near a production well. And those timetables are a little bit longer depending on drillers.
Does that long extensive too?
Correct. But that gives you the best look at what you might get into, because again, with the risk management, you don't want to get into where. You know, if you're pulling from a 4-inch well or something really small, it's not necessarily indicative of what the larger well would look like, at higher flow rates. Again, it could have a larger change in water quality, which you just wouldn't see in a small well configuration.
Are you talking 24-inch wells? Larger?
It would probably be somewhere in the, my guess is, 8, 10, 12-inch casings, depending on, it also depends on what we can find. If you're pushing a 300 gallon per minute flow rate versus if we can get up to the 700, 600 or 700 gallon, that's what you, so.
I mean, I feel that it's, it doesn't hurt to set up a meeting with the water board, get our questions answered, and then get an estimate on the study. To move forward with the project. Any input from the other counselors, do we wanna go ahead and get those going, or? We wanna ask questions during the next 2 weeks and put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
I think it's better to get moving on it, get the information now.
Is that a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Meet with the water board and to get a pricing proposal for the water study. That's not study.
And we can include some details on the hydraulic study, just to kind of provide a context of what it's gonna be, so. Some bullet points.
I'll second the motion.
Right, there's a motion and a second to go ahead with the action items of getting our questions answered and a cost estimate. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next, we have 12.5, 2025 seasonal Fisherman's Point campground application.
All right, so it's that time of year. In addition to having paper applications this year, I've also put together a Google survey people can fill out if they would like to submit it electronically. It's a little easier on people's hands if they're submitting more than one application. They would also be required to be sure they call in or drop off payment prior to the deadline for those online apps to be considered. The other question out there is the cost for lake access and non-lake access sites for 2025. You did not raise rates last year. And you are at the lower end as far as non-water sewer for
seasonal sites in the area. For the last 2 years, they've been lake access 2,800 and non-lake access 2,300. Correct.
Good question, if I may. How are these roads determined, and once paved, what is that money used for, what can the city do?
So the rates are determined, typically, there's a percentage that is electricity and a percentage that is the actual rates for utilizing the site. They were originally based on a percentage discount from an entire season amount, and then they just increased from there. Because most of these sites have stayed on the seasonal list, I don't have any data as to how much they'd make if they were on a nightly reservation basis. So that's why we just increased the amount every so often. The money is utilized primarily at Fisherman's Point, but it does go into the general fund. And so the Fisherman's Point is a general fund department of the city. And so we do have a specific assigned fund for Fisherman's Point that, for example, we utilized those funds most recently to build a new bathhouse down there. So it is set aside, but the council can choose to spend that money elsewhere if they would like.
Just as a comparison, when I looked at the Babbitt Camp Road rates, they do have water sewer hookup for all their sites. Their premium sites, which are the few that have lake access, they are charging $3,600. So we're quite a bit under that, but they do have water and sewer hookups.
Another discussion on the rate structure. And I know we didn't raise it last year, costs go up every year, would be in favor of raising. Did a couple $100 for lake access, being that we are on the low end for our area.
All the seasonal bid go last week, right?
Yes. Yep, and in the seasonal, so we draw for all the sites and then we draw 20 alternates. If we get through the entire alternate list and the sites are still open, they get moved to our monthly reservations. So they go where they are opened up for 1 month chunks instead.
But that hasn't.
It happened not in 23, but in 22.
And there was more seasonal sites that year, right?
There were,
We
we didn't draw enough alternates.
Are we looking at keeping the monthly rates the same then?
That would be up to the council when they discuss nightly rates. So how the monthly rates are calculated is it's the number of days plus a 10% discount on that. So if you raise nightly rates, they would increase with that.
How did the monthlies do so far this year?
They did pretty well, especially in the more popular warmer months.
Yeah.
They did pretty nice. And remember, we chose the monthlies, we took half pretty popular sites and half less popular sites. And so we get a good mix of people in there, depending on what they like. Some people really like to be close to the ATV trail. Some people like to be on the lake.
How many sites total are there?
94,
How many are leased season?
30.
So about 30%.
Yeah. They are also working on putting a handicapped site in where the old bathrooms were that they tore down, the brown ones by the 2015 bathhouse.
What will that do?
It has to have a improved pad and certain slopes to the pad.
Is there plans to put water and sewer throughout the campground at all?
The council has discussed that in the past. We are out of compliance right now with the Minnesota Department of Health. We are required to have water within 400 feet of each site. We do not. So we will be required to install water lines in the near future to meet that requirement. We have discussed it. So if you think about where the current bathhouse is and where the new bathhouse is, that much was $120,000 that water line was. And so it's comes at a significant cost to do that.
just extending it from Patriot Point?
No, that's just from the bathhouse that's right there by the office to the new ones we just built. So it's,
So there is a city line out.
yes, it gets blown out in the winter.
And we'd be looking at extending it, that's the same distance to get to all the sites, right?
Yeah, you have to extend it not only down the point, but into the picnic loop as well. To meet that requirement.
The pay for that would be using some of this money that we have in that. fund.
You'd be building revenue, just remember you did just pay for the bathhouse, so your revenues from that are pretty depleted. So you'd have to work to save for it, but yes,
Do they have water out of the new portion of the campground?
do you mean like the dirt loop?
Yes.
No.
Have a discussion on raising it, the lake access to $3,000, any comments on that, is that? A little too much.
I second
So did you want to do lake by to 3,000 and non-lake to 25, raise both $200? Do you want to just raise lake access?
With the Babbitt ones too, are those non-like access or?
They only have 6 lake access,
Okay.
maybe 7.
And do they
So it's
have a difference in cost? You said, what,
Yeah,
36?
3,600 for the premium, what they're calling it, was lake access or close to lake. And the regulars. Was 3,300. But again, they all water and sewer, so you have to worry about filling your water tanks and emptying your sewage.
3,300.
Yeah, I think that being 3,600, if we were 3,000, it doesn't cost $600 to, fill your tank of water and drain your gray and black water a season. In slight inconvenience, knowing from being out there a few years, but it doesn't cost $600 to do that.
Yeah, if we're gonna be required to add piping and water and things like that in the near future. It's a mandate, correct?
Yes, we're out of compliance right now.
Yeah, could get our funds back out. 3,000. Good idea.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking 200 each, I didn't specify that, yeah, each, and non-lake access, so increase them both 200.
That's a motion, like I said, I'll second it.
Yeah, I wrote it down, so it's official.
Officially passed. We've got a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll get that seasonal out and then we discuss monthly.
When we talk about, the fee schedule, one thing I did want to mention, for everyone who's going to apply, if you do apply online and you have problems, please let me know. It's the first year we're looking at doing this, and, there might be some hiccups or issues that I could fix if you're running into issues, so.
There's no, you don't get any favorable, if you apply online, it's still, it's the same thing, well, it doesn't mean you got yours in person and you're guaranteed over the paper form, it's just another.
It's just less typing for office. Type.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to 12.6, resolution 2024-20, support of the County State Highway 100 railroad crossing grade separation project.
So St. Louis County has requested a resolution of support. They are looking at building a bridge over the railroad tracks. And if you remember, earlier in the year, this council passed a letter requesting that St. Louis County find an alternate way around the railroad tracks, as there's a significant concern for emergency services getting stuck on one side or another of that railroad crossing. This bridge would alleviate those issues and concerns. And so if the council wishes to issue that resolution of support, we can get it over to St. Louis County so they can approve a plat of that name.
And just to clarify, this is in no way part of the county road project, the roundabout, the parking on Main Street, this is a separate issue.
This is just from the
insured road.
Yeah, yeah,
Is it done,
is one.
that bridge?
No, they're looking for resolutions of support right now to apply for funding.
Can I make a comment on this? Like I told you the other day, I myself have been in an ambulance, lights and siren when pulled up, and we were delayed by ordinance. I understand that. But is it possible they could investigate placing another crossing somewhere in town that would alleviate that situation for their potential for harm or delay or whatever is pretty minimum, I understand. But, I mean, you could take from Highway 100 straight over to lane 55 and cut over. They could put a crossing at that point, gate it and fence it, and have it controlled electronically, through like garage door openers or whatever, at a whole lot less cost than what they're planning on spending on replacing something that they took out back in the 60s.
Yep, and so that was the letter that this council issued, is requesting a crossing on lane 55.
Okay, I just.
Yeah, no, I know. So yeah, that's what this council requested. They said, that's not something they're gonna consider as part of this project because it takes significant negotiations with the federal government and the railroad company.
It's basically impossible to get
Yeah.
a new railroad crossing. But you can go over it.
I understand, and I know the railroad companies, I know people who have been unable to log their property because of lack of a temporary crossing just to get to 80 acres of fantastic timber that
Yep.
the railroad denied them access to, so it's something like that has happened, but it just struck me that to spend the money and to do something that they had before and then pulled it out for the minuscule chance, I shouldn't say minuscule, I'm not belittling that, but it seems like an awful lot of money to spend when you could spend a whole lot less and have a crossing available that could be used in case of an emergency.
And they claim that, their response to our letter was that there is another emergency crossing about 100 feet west of that, which was used during the construction last.
Yes, I remember that. If you have,
Which will also be blocked by the train.
if you have a major derailment, that will
Yeah.
be covered with it. There's no way our train would not extend past that, for that temporary one.
Yeah. Is this meant to be in the same project timeline as?
No, so, Highway 100 will be 26 and the bridge would be 27. That's the most recent update I've heard. It might have changed since.
They're gonna redo all the road and they're gonna tear it.
Yeah, I don't know if they're not gonna do that section or what their plan is there. I did not attend the meeting, so.
And I think that's something any of us as counselors or individuals who have that feeling, we could, contact the county and let them express their opinion and let them know, that. An alternative could be, to make another crossing and see what kind of response. We get from that.
Study two showed that there hadn't been any accidents there in a number of years, so.
A lot of hours of delay, but yeah, no crashes, I've seen on there. They're they're not asking us for any money for the project, so I mean, I don't mind supporting and looking for funding for the project, but again, as individuals, we can all reach out to the county. And let them know what we think of it.
It's still pretty bridge in winter.
Any more discussion on it? Feelings on supporting the motion or not? I mean, a lot of their statements in here, are true, it would improve traffic safety, it would improve. Eliminate the risk of closure, and they're not false statements.
Improve pedestrian traffic, some separation there
Yeah,
for pedestrians.
I know the school's working on, we call them safe routes to school, where they have a grant they got, they're looking at ways to make sure kids can cross major highways, intersections, just busy parts of the road, railroad tracks safely, so the school is working, with their safety committee on some grant funding to make sure there's safe routes to school for all kids who do walk to school, and this would help that cause as well.
Is this affecting like taxes or?
No, they're seeking federal grant dollars.
So yes, is your federal tax.
Yeah.
Right.
It always.
I'll stop doing something.
Yes. It won't be a county tax, but federally, but feel it eventually.
I'll make a motion to support.
There's been a motion, is there a second?
Yeah, I don't think it's the best route, but I'll support it because it's better than what we have. Yes.
All right, there is a motion and a second, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Being a majority is a yay, motion has been carried with one opposed. 12.7, agreement to supply free golf course guide.
So this company reached out to Wade to provide those golf course guides and review the contract and have them change some terms that we typically have them change, such as we go to court in Minnesota, not in Nevada, or wherever they were requesting. And so this would come at no cost to the city. How they are making their money is by selling advertisements to those golf course guides.
And then we just provide them to our customers at the golf course and they can.
Yeah, it'll help all the people out of town. It's good, you know, it's more marketing to tourists.
So what are these? Are these like pamphlets that you find in a hotel or?
No, they're more little outside of the sport card. They'll have each hole on it, and you can carry it in your pocket to look where to go next. It'll have green contours, tell you how far the sand trap is from the tee box, that kind of stuff.
It's a book that's specific to our course.
Yeah. The Giants Ridge uses them. It'd be about the same thing.
Yeah, being that they're free to us and free to the public and it's a good way to market and promote our golf course, I would make a motion to sign this agreement.
I support.
There's been a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. 12.8, the final pay application to Landsea Enterprises in the amount of $44,825 for the Midway Shelter project.
So the punch list is complete and that the shelter itself is done, and so this is the final pay application for that project.
It's only been how many years in the making?
2019.
Many for mayors, board for mayors, and it's finally completed. Is there a motion to pay the last payment to Landsea?
I'll make that motion.
Got a motion, is there a second?
I'll support.
And support, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried, the Midway project is done.
No,
We're
the
not.
building.
The building, I should say. All right, that concludes our meeting, is there a motion to adjourn? I'll leave that.
I'll support.
All those in favor?
Aye.